Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Everybody.
We would like to introduce Spike. Many of you have seen his videos and
YouTube channel Spike R.
YouTube channel, yeah?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning and spending time and sharing your story with the world.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while, and I'm glad to be able to do it on your channel. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's all our pleasure. As most everybody knows, we're working real hard to expose every little level that involves the Watchtower and Bible Tract Society indoctrination, because we know that for many of us, some can wake up like this, what Kim and I appear to have done, and it takes others a lot longer to do that because there's so much indoctrination. But I think it's good to get together to record these interviews, because even from childhood, we can now determine the different levels of indoctrination. And I think that that's what you would like to do here, correct? Just kind of like tell your story and show how some of the indoctrination process works from a young child all the way up to being an elder and even the Kobe of a congregation.
Yes. And, I made sure to get a little bit of facial hair so people would know how evil I am now.
yeah, I understand. I got the long hair going too.
Isn't it funny when you look back and something as simple as this makes you an evil person?
Yeah, well, there again, that's part of the indoctrination. That's part of the pattern, because they want you to fit their mold, their identity, what they perceive to be something acceptable to God. And yet, when you go back and look at the Bible and reread the Bible, you see that the men were required to have beards, not to shave their beards. And being one of Jehovah's Witnesses ourselves, one of the funniest things that we used to say is that if Samson walked in the Kingdom Hall today, that man would not be qualified to even pass a mic because of his long hair and beard. He wouldn't even qualify. So it's really interesting that the way they perceive how God views us, or how we should be viewed by God, totally contradicts God's perception of what men were like back in the Bible days. It's a total contrast.
Yeah. It's funny because it's easy for those of us who have been there and who have become awake and who have left to look back and think, we see how crazy the beliefs are, and sometimes we wonder, well, why can't everybody else just wake up? And part of this is why I wanted to tell my story, because I was a very thoroughly indoctrinated person from childhood. There's a perception, a lot of people think, well, why would you want to become an elder? What kind of jerk do you have to be to want to become an elder? But as a kid, I was always raised thinking that you do those things because that's how you serve Jehovah. So I always had this, true love for Jehovah in my heart. Yeah. And I thought, well, I've got to be all that I can be, so to speak, not for the Air Force, but for Jehovah. So my goals in doing that, like I remember being a little kid, and we had friends that were very spiritual, and I was like, oh, what are your spiritual goals? I'm like, I'm going to be a district overseer. Now, I wasn't thinking so I can roll around and be the king and tell people how much they're failing, but I was thinking, this is how you serve Jehovah, this is how you help. So that was my goal. I never wanted to be in charge of anybody, but I always had spiritual goals because I thought that's how you serve Jehovah, because that's what I was taught.
Yeah.
So from youth, my story is that my mother got baptized very early on in my life. I remember sitting in on her studies when I was maybe 3 years old.
Oh,
and
wow.
I even back then started underlining things because that's what they were doing.
That's what you do. Yeah, that's what you do.
So I forget what it was, but I remember sitting in on those studies, and I kind of remember some of the questions my mother would ask, and my young mind is like, oh, but this is God we're talking about. Why are you asking questions? So I got indoctrinated very fast, very early on. But later on, myself, when I would ask questions, because I remember sitting at the Kingdom Hall, and they were talking about something to do with the exile from Jerusalem. And they read one of the scriptures in Jeremiah, and it didn't say exile, it said desolation.
Yeah.
And what the brother was talking about clearly was not what was in the scripture. So I read above, I read below, I'm like, he's not talking about what is in the scripture. So I'm like, all right, well, forget about it. Maybe I just don't understand. Mind flip off.
Yep.
And when I asked my mother, I'm like, how do they know that Jesus was talking about the 7 times in Daniel in Matthew 24? And she couldn't give me a good answer. She's like, oh, they just know. So she was doing her best, but by this time she was also thoroughly indoctrinated.
Yeah.
So the answer that you give when you're indoctrinated is pretty much you toe the line and you expect other people to. So this is part of how I learned to shut my mind off.
Well, that's like, being an elder as you were, and I'm sure that you've probably done this, being indoctrinated, when somebody would come up and have a question that would seemingly contradict the Watchtower theology. You were trained to say, well, just leave it in Jehovah's hands, and in due time, Jehovah would make it clear. And or if you had a brother that approached you that was having a problem with another elder, the conditioned response is, well, in Book of Revelation, those 7 stars in Jesus' hands, those picture the elders. Now, don't you think that Jesus knows what's going on in his right hand? Leave it up to Jesus, but that's all part of the process to shut you down and stop that critical thinking.
Yeah, you're right. You know what, Mikey? Next time I'm in an elders meeting, I'll recommend you to be an elder.
Yeah, it works. Hey, well, I've been in enough elders meeting that I know how this crap works now.
Well, it's different when it's just elders there. When there are people that are not elders, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So I'll get to that when I get to that part of the story.
Okay, cool.
So I had your typical JW upbringing. I never really liked going out in service as a kid because I wanted to watch Saturday morning cartoons. But I thought it was something we had to do, so we did it, and it was the right thing to do. And service, especially as a kid, I never really was extremely scared of finding people that I knew, because for the most part, I was that good little J-Dub that told everybody I was a J-Dub. So I wasn't too afraid of it. I was a little bit. There might be once or twice I ran into kids from school, and it was whatever. But to me, that was just my version of reality.
Yeah.
So that was, looking back, like I never felt like I was missing out on anything because I was that indoctrinated at the time. But I do remember towards teenage years, like enjoying more freedom that we had from like getting cars, being able to go places, going to the conventions by ourselves. But I was always indoctrinated enough that I was going to do the right JW thing anyway, because that was who I was. So I was alive during that brief period of time where they eased up on the requirements for college. It wasn't recommended, but it was also, not encouraged. So my mother very much so wanted us to get college educations because she was very observant. She was, very smart, and she could see that, look, all these people who haven't had an education, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff to make ends meet, and there's no point of doing that. So all of us got educations. I became an engineer, which is a good job. So I'm very thankful to her that she was at least coherent enough at that time to recommend that, because that has had a profound impact on my life, and I'm very thankful for that. But I remember going on service with a circuit overseer when I just first started college in the mid-'90s. It's like, do you really want to waste 4 years of your time with an education? This system is almost over.
Yeah.
Like, it's been 20 years since that day. More than. I'm like, yeah, I'm glad that I wasted that 4 years.
Yeah.
I don't know that circuit overseer. I mean, he was a nice guy. He meant well, but he was indoctrinated. And the kids today get the same thing. Do you really want to spend 4 years of your life? And 20 years later, yes, you'll wish that you spent that 4 years and maybe more. Yeah. So I remember those experiences. Going to college as a witness was interesting, though. I compartmentalized things. Like, I lived my JW life, and to me that was my reality. And I went into the world for my education and did what I had to do and kept those people at arm's length. Yeah. So I never, despite the fact that we were learning how to think, I was always able to kind of say, well, this isn't my reality, because I was that indoctrinated. Yeah. And so education alone doesn't necessarily make somebody wake up, even though it gives you the tools to do such.
And I think you just said a very important catchphrase. That's not your reality. So we as Jehovah's Witnesses are taught to have a different reality in life. Mm-hmm. And going to college, that's why you were able to stay indoctrinated, because you maintain that vision of your reality, like all of us have. I guess, all those years that I've had problems with elders, I was able to maintain the reality that, well, one day Jehovah's going to fix this, but that's not the reality.
It's not a reality.
As we all now know.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, too, having grown up as a witness, I only had Jehovah's Witness friends. So I would go to school and I would talk with people, and I had a group of people there that I would hang out with, because there might have been one or two other witnesses in the school at the time. And a lot of times there were kids that were not good witnesses like I was. So I wasn't really close to any of them, but I had people that went to school. They could have been my friends. They would have been really good friends. They were all like me. They were, heading off to college. They were going to go build a life for themselves. But I never did anything with them outside of school. I never participated in any extracurricular activities. There was maybe once I did something, and it was fun, but to me, it was not my reality. So somehow that's just the way it worked.
Did you feel a little guilt while you were doing that because of this reality thing?
At times, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, one of the times I really felt guilty, I was in 4th grade, and they were having a contest to decorate pumpkins. And I thought I had a good idea of how to do it, so I ended up like participating. And afterwards, I'm like, what did I just do?
Yeah.
I was worshiping Satan for a minute.
Well, I could just imagine your mindset at the time as you've got this nice pumpkin and you're thinking, how could I carve the tetragrammaton in this so that I could witness?
Today it would be jw.org.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, it'd be exactly.
Oh, that was way before jw.org.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but that's the type of stuff that happened. So, I grew up, and my goal was always to pioneer, because they put that in front of you, like, oh, if you're a spiritual person, you pioneer. Pioneers are the happiest people, and, this is how you serve Jehovah. It's a very common theme, as you can see from all the literature, that no matter how much you're doing, it's never enough for them. No matter who you are, no matter what sacrifice you made, it's never enough.
Right.
And I thoroughly got that. That came across loud and clear to me. So I pioneered after college for a year. I only made it for a year because at the time I had a girlfriend that I got engaged to and was going to get married, but that didn't work out for a number of different reasons. And the way that it didn't work out ended up not causing trouble for either one of us, which was good. I'm not going to get much into that. But anyways, I continued working towards my goal of being an elder. So when that all went down, I was a ministerial servant at the time, but things were fine with that. So I progressed and kept on working. And in the back of my mind, it always bothered me that 1914 was so far in the past.
Yeah.
But I always waited on Jehovah. I remember in the 90s especially, the increase was so big because Russia had just opened up, and I'm like, all right, well maybe Jehovah's putting the end off because all these people are becoming Jehovah's Witnesses. And so not only just when I pioneered, but even afterwards, I always was good at placing books. If I had a Bible study for even 1/10 of the books I placed, I would have had 1 or 2 Bible studies all the time every year when I was a Jehovah's Witness. But that never happened. It must have been that I was able to talk to people that were intelligent enough to read the book and go, oh my God, I got to get away from this.
Yeah, this doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that. But eventually I did end up becoming an elder. I was young. I was in my late 20s. I remember thinking what a privilege it was that I finally, had got appointed. And nothing woke me up at that time didn't quite wake me up, but nothing shocked me so much as my first elders meeting. So coming from my background, you expect an elders meeting to be this thing with these holy, righteous brothers are there. They're considering their Bibles. They're praying about everything. Maybe they have some special direction from the governing body as to how to handle things. No, it was like a business meeting. It's like,
yeah.
We're going to do this, check. Okay, thanks, guys. Have a good night. I'm like, huh? What just happened here? And it would get downhill. It would progress quite a bit downhill. And being an elder is actually probably a big component to my eventually having woken up. Because I've told you guys some stories about the body of elders that I served on.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. So we had some good elders and we had some bad elders. So there are guys that, like myself, were really sincere about wanting to do the right thing, about wanting to help people. But there were also guys that thought that they walked on water. They thought that they should run everybody's life, and they didn't care about what the Bible said or what the direction was. They wanted things their way. And we had guys like that on our body. And the way the body of elders worked, it wasn't like this initially, but there were some problems that I was close to the original presiding overseer when I was serving, and we were very much so on the same page about taking care of these problems. But this brother he had been an elder obviously a lot longer than I was, and he had seen issues on that body. There were things that went up to the district overseer that had to be addressed. The presiding overseer for him was basically told to stop being the presiding overseer, so not quite removed because he kept being an elder, but at the direction of this district overseer, because this presiding overseer was a very harsh, demanding individual. So anyways, then the one that was my friend was there, and we were very much so on the same page. We tried to address some of the issues. But as we did this, eventually I became the secretary because something happened there where that brother could no longer serve. And so I'm still the youngest guy in the body, and I'm getting the second hardest job on the body. It's basically the other guys didn't want to do the work. I mean, they were smart enough to know it was a lot of work, and they didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
So this perception of elders as like always being willing, like it's falling away. And I'm seeing who these guys really are, and most of them really didn't want to do all the work that the society wanted you to do. So I became the secretary. And anyway, so we worked on stuff, we talked together, but when we tried to make things go right, tried to make people or be reasonable, it caused problems on the body. It started fights in the body of elders. And it didn't matter that we had scriptures, it didn't matter that we had things from the literature, it didn't matter any of that. It caused problems. So this brother, like having been through it before, finally got tired and he went somewhere else. And the body's like, oh, well, let's make you the coordinator. I'm like, I really don't want to do this.
Oh, no.
But they didn't want to
Welcome to your new reality.
Yeah. So anyways, they thought, one, they didn't want to do the work, and two, they thought, oh, this is the young guy, like we can boss him around and blah, blah, blah. But at this time, I was very close with another friend who was an elder who had been on the same body, and he had fought the fight, and he moved on because it was so abusive and hard to do it. So basically, during the time I was the coordinator, I was still trying to address these issues, but I was basically fighting this other guy's proxy war is what it came down to, because he still was trying to fix things, but couldn't.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. I never personally wanted to impose my own way of doing things, but the problem is when you get into a situation where people are unreasonable, where they become, I don't want to say abusive, but they're prone to outbursts of anger, it changes the way you react to the situation. So things that would have been a small thing, in my mind, became a huge thing because things that were huge things were always super huge things. So it had a very negative, very stressful impact on me. And serving as an elder was anything but joyous. It was anything but rewarding. I oftentimes felt worn out, beat up after going to those elders meetings. Sitting on judicial committees was never fun. I always hated it. I remember one time there was a person whose committee we sat on, and this was a good person. I mean, this person really had a good heart, but they got caught up in something. They made a mistake. But what happened is the mistake that they made was to a level where we literally were not allowed to accept their plea of repentance. And so we had to disfellowship them, and I felt really bad about that. I did what I thought was my job. They came back, but that's kind of a snippet of being an elder. Sitting in judgment of someone that you would not judge the same way if you had the freedom to make those decisions.
So let me make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying here, because never having been inside the workings of an elder body in a judicial hearing from an elder's perspective, we're always sitting in the audience and we're hearing things like, well, the elders don't disfellowship anybody. The person disfellowships themselves from having an unrepentant attitude or something to that effect. If I understood you right, you said that this person committed a sin to where you had no choice but to disfellowship them?
The way the rules read, that's what I took from it. So the judicial process is a very rules-based process. Of course, the people who are accused never get to see what those rules are.
Yeah.
They're never allowed to have anybody advocate for them. You can have people come in and give their testimony about what happened, but they're invited to give their testimony, they're excused right after it. Yeah. That being the case, I've never been involved in a case where somebody ever gave any testimony about anything. So as you wake up and come away, you come to realize how much hypocrisy is involved with the Watchtower. The Judicial Committee is the best description or the best example of hypocrisy that they have. They say, oh, this is a loving process. This is set up to help people. It's not. The judicial process is about determining how much you are going to punish that person. So when you are invited to a judicial committee, it's because they believe they have proof that you have committed a serious sin that could get you expelled from the congregation. So if indeed a sin has been committed, there's no, okay, well, you're forgiven, forget about it, nothing's going to happen. will help you to build your spiritual strength back up. If you have committed a sin, at the very least, you are going to be privately reproved. So that means that probably no one's going to find out about your sin. It wasn't that bad, so we'll just reprove you. We won't announce it, but people will just have to wonder why you're not giving talks anymore, why you're not coming to the meetings. And they'll put the dots together. They always do.
Yeah.
If it's bad enough where it'll get known and it could cause an issue, then you get publicly reproved. And that's where your name's announced and everyone knows. And the funny thing about reproof is there are a number of Jehovah's Witnesses that will treat you as if you are disfellowshipped when you are reproved.
Yeah.
And it's a common perception. So getting reproved is only moderately better than getting disfellowshipped.
Yeah,
So
because you're supposed to limit your association with them anyways. Because I remember, we had another couple that was freshly married, young married, but before their marriage there was some immorality, but it didn't come out until after they were married. They were publicly reproved, and the congregation about the same time was planning a picnic, and this couple, even though they were married now, but were publicly reproved, could not go to this, congregation picnic because we were supposed to limit our association with them. And I find that very contradictory to some of the Watchtower mindset, because having been in this long enough, I've always heard the catchphrase, well, if the elders are gonna error, let's make an error on the side of mercy. And how is it that you show anybody mercy for this particular couple, now that I'm thinking back, that they've been publicly reproved, they've confessed their sin, they've accepted the counsel, but you can't go to the congregation picnic. Where's that perception of mercy? It just doesn't exist.
No, the Watchtower organization neither understands the term mercy, nor do they understand the term love. They have twisted both of those terms into some horrible alternate universe version of what those words actually mean.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, is part of the indoctrination, is you have a different vocabulary, as we all well know, and your version of love has nothing to do with love, and the same thing with mercy. So the judicial process is an example of this. So going on to what gets you disfellowshipped, there are a couple of things. One is if your attitude is not repentant, which means if the elders don't think that you're working with them, even if you say you're sorry and you're doing all the right things, if your attitude is not one that they perceive to be repentance, if they think, oh, well, he's just sorry he got caught, then you'll get disfellowshipped. If you've sinned to a certain level where they don't believe they can accept your plea of repentance, you will be disfellowshipped. So there are instructions in letters from the governing body. There are instructions in the Shepherd the Flock book. And when you go to KM school, they have symposium or talks on how to do this. And there's a video that's been out about the judicial process with Robbie and how he ended up getting disfellowship. So you're trained to look for certain things. And there's basically this invisible line that's written, and your job is to kind of determine have these people cross the line. So one thing, the biggest thing people get disfellowship for is fornication/adultery. So elders, depending on what body of elders you are on, will ask numerous invasive, disturbing questions about the situations because they're trying to figure out if you crossed the line. And I would imagine that some of the brothers that are doing that are probably, maybe getting off on it to some extent too.
Yep.
Myself, I never enjoyed doing that. It was always highly embarrassing. I always like to ask the very minimum that I actually had to ask just to find out. I wanted to keep details at a minimum because to be honest, who wants to know that stuff about somebody else? Why would you? That's none of your business. So that was always very disturbing. But that's why you hear a number of people that have had experiences where the elders ask this embarrassing question and that embarrassing question. And it's disgusting. It's a disgusting process. But it's one that they're going through to figure out, have you crossed that line? And depending on the body of elders, the group of people involved, where that line is movable.
Yeah.
So when I've had a couple of people ask me about the judicial process, and there is quite a bit of variation from body to body and even within a body as to how that's going to be handled. What I can do is share what the rules are, and how different people interpret the rules means there's always going to be latitude. So like in the case where we ended up disfellowshipping somebody for something, others may not have. Because I was a pretty rules-driven person. being in a cult, it's always very black and white, and
Yeah.
I very much so became that person because I thought, well, this is how you please God, is by dotting your I's and crossing your T's. And a lot of that carried over into my own personal life. And I realized that in college, we had this class where it was a really small class, but we each like graded each other on our projects. And I was a super hard ass grading because I had such a black and white thinking. And, you know, so everyone repaid me with grading me the same way. And I had it coming. You know, I deserved it. But after that, I stepped back and I'm like, wow, what did I just do? I'm like, why was I such a jerk?
Yeah.
And it's from this indoctrination.
Yeah.
You know, so witnesses have this idea that elders are these kind, loving people until you actually interact with them. But the training that you get, you're not taught to be kind and loving. You're taught to be rules-based. You're taught to be arrogant. You're basically taught that you're always right no matter what. They tell you, oh, yeah, sometimes a brother or sister will give you advice and you should listen to it. But they say that, but it's only lip service.
You know, it's interesting that you say that because it was a similar comment that I mentioned to Deep Throat when he was here, which he perceived to be the opening to talk about, you know, his belief that Jesus didn't die on a stake but really died on a cross is what he believes now. But it was funny because the comment that alerted him that my mind was, you know, not quite indoctrinated was that, you know, I told him, I says that Jehovah's Witnesses are the most self-deceived people on the face of the earth because they actually believe the elders are going to be there when the going gets tough, and they ain't going to be there. And he took that comment as, you know what, maybe now I better say something while, you know, the getting's good. And it's like, wow, it's just like, oh, I got it all now. But you're absolutely right, because I even remember, and everybody in this community knows how indoctrinated my mother is, but it was interesting to observe that when my dad passed away, after a couple of weeks, the elders quit calling on her. And after a couple of months, she was actually crying to me that the elders are no longer giving her support and that I'm the congregational widow. Where's my support from the elder body? There was just none. And it was at that point, because my dad's been dead, what, 12, 15 years, something like that now. It was at that point that I really started beginning to observe how the elders are truly not there for you when the going gets tough. There seems like there is absolutely no support system from the elders.
23.
Has it been that long already? My goodness. Boy, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah. So from the elder standpoint, I'll explain a little bit of why that is. So even the elders that have the best of intentions, you have so much useless, pathetic crap to do as an elder that you're busy all the time. And myself, when I was an elder, I mean, I was involved with the RVC. I would go to unassigned territory. I would do stuff for conventions and whatnot. I had a lot of stuff to do. So you feel as if you're not even allowed to live your own life. I felt that way a number of times because there were things that I had to put aside and put on hold because I was doing theocratic activities. And it always bothered me a lot. I was actually not very happy. I was very, it was really stressful not being allowed to live your life. And it came across loud and clear when you're an elder that there's always something else to do. So when somebody has a problem, like, okay, I've got to help them, I want to help them. But then, you know, you've only got so much time. And so what happens is you develop this really bad personality trait of like doing the bare minimum and thinking, oh, well, that's good enough. So this, you come to realize once you get out and look back, like just how dehumanizing it is to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So all of the love and the fellow feeling that you would have and express to these people is absolutely crushed under the weight of all these organizational things that you have to keep up with. Because mind you, when the circuit overseer comes around, they'll say, oh, you're doing a good job, but then they will rip you a new one if they think that something's wrong. You know, it doesn't matter how hard you're working. If you're not up to date on your records here, there, they will rip you a new one. Most of them will. Some of them are nice and they kind of try to tiptoe around it. But when they come around, they're checking on the finances. They want to make sure your accounts are in line. They go through every single person's publisher record card. You know, they want to make sure that people are getting their hours there. They're very concerned with, aren't you shepherding the friends enough? Why are their hours down so much? And there's a lot of pressure to get people out in the ministry as much as possible. Now, as far as the stuff going on, they don't care about that as much. So what happens is you become a very numbers focused person, and that's why you don't. Even the good elders oftentimes won't express true love in a way that a Christian should and ought, because they're under this organizational pressure.
Yeah.
So I very much so saw that.
Well, and I think, coming out of Watchtower and putting ourselves in the view of XJWs, and you'll probably agree with this, we actually find ourselves being more helpful and useful to our fellow human beings doing what we're doing now, communicating with them and helping them get through all this, rhetoric of the Watchtower indoctrination.
Well, I'll tell you what, I do agree with that wholeheartedly. I feel that since I have left, I have helped out far more people, far more than I ever could have in an entire life as an elder, circuit overseer, whatever. And I look back and I feel partly responsible for that time, because I was the company, because that's what they are. The company used me as a tool to accomplish their ends.
Yeah.
And I look back, I tried to be, a lot of people that I worked with at the time really liked me. They were thankful for the way I worked with them. But I was always focused on getting them back out in service. Like, that was the solution, get to the meetings, have more family study. And ironically, I found out just how well that worked later on myself. But I very much so was that guy. And people were appreciative because I tried to have some human feeling. But nonetheless, I very much so told the line and always tried to direct people towards more activity.
Yeah.
When I was on stage, I would encourage it, talking with people, working with them in field service. Despite the fact, honestly, I didn't really like going out in field service myself. But anyway. So eventually, I became the coordinator of the body of elders, and that was an extremely stressful job. At one point, though, I actually went to the school for elders in Patterson.
Oh, nice.
So at that time, I was the coordinator, and the school was held at Patterson specifically for coordinators. My class was somewhere around 80 to 100 people, all elders. I was the youngest one there. There might have been someone close to my age. But I found that up to 1/3 of those brothers talked about there being severe discord in their bodies of elders.
Wow.
One brother was specifically sent into a body because the body was in such discord. At times, the elders' meetings would almost come to physical blows.
Yeah.
So if the elders put on a show of being a cohesive unit, you don't know whether or not that's true, because behind closed doors, they might be a very argumentative, angry group of people. And that was my experience. I saw that within my own body. In fact, I'll tell the story about one brother who caused me a great deal of stress. This guy, I had known him since I was a little kid. We had done stuff together, our families, and I liked him. I thought he was a good guy. But when I began to see who he was, some people had told me that had worked with him before. And when I became an elder, I began to see firsthand. And I began to hear stories about the way he had treated people in the past. He had gone over and above requirements. He tried to impose his will on a number of people for probably decades. He had, to the best of my knowledge, stumbled people out of the organization. And he was very forceful about wanting his way, whether or not he had scriptural reasons for it. And he just very much so wanted to be in charge. He wanted everything to be discussed that didn't need to. He wanted lots of elders meetings. He was a very hard person to work with. So it came to a point. There was something going on in the congregation. We needed to look for a place to build a hall. And we did this, and it was a contentious process. But he had some individuals where they were going to buy the lands, and then they were going to sell it to us at a substantial profit. But this was going to be a favor to us. So what he did is he gave us the rush job on the sales. Like, we got to act now, because if we don't do this, we're going to lose this piece of property. Like, he's all selling it and blah, blah, blah. And anyways, at this time, he was very high up in the RBC, so we kind of just allowed him to run with the ball, as it were. We got together, we had our meetings with those involved, and we decided to vote on it. But the way we presented it is we presented the property and voted on it in the same night, which is not what you're supposed to do. So the vote came in yes, because who's ever going to vote against something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So there are a number of people that just didn't vote, but later, not long after that, it came out that there was grumblings about people that didn't want to buy the property. He wanted to go and talk to those individuals and explain to them why we should move forward with this particular property. Anyways, we looked back into it as a body of elders. We actually checked the real estate information, because we were basically sold the property as if, well, they're paying this for it, we'll pay this for it, but it's actually worth what we're going to be paying for it. The thing is, it wasn't worth what we were going to be paying for it. That company was going to be making a substantial profit to the tunes of tens of thousands of dollars for flipping a property to us. And he's trying to push this forward. And it was a rush job because they were going to do it so fast. I'll tell you what, to this day, years later, that property is still for sale.
Wow.
So there was another piece of property that after that all blew over that everybody liked, and we voted on it. And he made a huge stink about it. We got together 5 different congregations and 2 circuit overseers, and it was still approved. And this guy dragged his heels and threw up all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And anyways, this ended up getting elevated to a higher level because we had this property that nobody liked, where somebody that he basically did business with was going to make a lot of money. So just connect the dots.
Yeah.
What do you think's in there? But then we had this other property that everybody loved, and he's dragging his heels something fierce. And the way that went down is it got brought up, and the RBC basically denied everything. And the people that looked bad after that was the ones who tried to bring it to light. Mm-hmm. And at that point, after being on this body of elders where all this craziness had happened, where I was so stressed out, where we finally got to the point where something could be done, it was even more stressful. But later on down the road after that, something else came up with the same brother. So he was basically acting in a way that was almost causing divisions on the body, which is very serious in terms of the watchtower. He was basically giving one of the other elders the cold shoulder. And so we, once again, worked through the process to try to get it taken care of. But this all happened as circuit overseers were changing. So the circuit overseer that we had, he was, working with us on this. But then the next visit was a brand new circuit overseer. And he got this stack of information. Here's what's going on. Here's how we handled it, blah, blah, blah. So he walked into this, and he was a younger guy. Anyways, the first night he met with us, I forget what it was. But anyways, after our first meeting, that brother that was in trouble, that was not working with the body of elders, he sat and he talked to the circuit overseer for an hour and a half, at least.
Oh, wow.
And after he did that, the circuit overseer didn't want to hear anything from anybody else. He didn't care.
Wow.
So whenever something happened there, because that brother probably would have been removed that time for all the abuses he had foisted for his behavior, it got shut down. And the next time that circuit overseer came along, once again, problems arose, as they would on a body like that, and that guy blamed me for it. So at this point, I'm like, I am stressed out to the max. I am running scared. I am super anxious. I want to get out because it's at this point, I think it's my JW neck on the line. So along this time, I had been looking for a long time for a marriage mate. Well, I finally found one. So I found this sister. She was a nice sister, pretty little thing, very upbeat, very positive, well liked, and on top of that, she was in a different congregation. So that was a good thing. She was somewhere else, but we dated. She met my friends. Everybody loved her. Great person. Things were great. Everybody was happy that we were getting together. It was, going to be a really good thing. So, anyways, I married her, but before I did, a month or two before we married, I actually moved to her congregation just to get away. So I was reappointed there in short order, and it was nice. So there was a good congregation. The body of elders was way more functional. There were a bunch of really nice guys, and I really liked them all. I liked working with them. They were all guys that genuinely cared for people, that genuinely loved people, and genuinely believed they were doing the good thing, the right thing. So I can't say anything bad about those guys. They were great guys. I have love for them in my heart. I have love for all those people in my heart. But of course they won't understand them.
Right.
So anyways though, so we get married, and the honeymoon ended the day the honeymoon ended. we came back that day, and she gets this deer in the headlight look in her eyes like, oh, I want to go spend the night with my roommate, my old roommate. And I'm like, huh? I'm like, what? And I'm like, is there something wrong? And she wouldn't talk about it, just this crazy look in her eyes. So finally, I let her call up her roommate. She does. Her roommate proceeds to laugh at her, and that was the end of it. But the next day, I'm like, oh my God, what just happened here? And of course, I was still indoctrinated. I'm like, did I just marry someone with the gift of singleness? There is such a thing as the gift of singleness.
No, there's not.
But anyways, coming from this place where I just literally pretty much had my ass handed to me, here I am jumping into what I thought was going to be the loving relationship I'd been looking for so long. And then all of a sudden I found out, danger, Will Robinson. There's some.
Yeah.
So as it progressed, the first few months weren't that bad, but things got bad pretty quick. By the time 3 months was up, the marriage was already shambles.
It's a shame.
She was a person. She would start fights over stuff, and I couldn't stop the fights. She began to accuse me of being interested in all kinds of other sisters I didn't necessarily even talk to. I don't remember chronologically how everything happened, so I'm just going to talk about the whole experience because it was a real blur. It was a real, like, a mind frag is the best way I'll put it. It got to the point, though, where I realized that for me to stop a fight, I had to walk out of my own house, a house that I had owned before I married her. So my house was becoming no longer my home. I would come home and I would not know which person would be there. So even the good times weren't good because you're waiting for that next explosion. So you're always on edge. We had different work schedules. So one story I'll tell is she got a job once where she worked late, and there happened to be another witness there. And so after work, sometimes they would go out to bars for karaoke without telling me. So I would just wonder why she wasn't coming home. And, I was blah, 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 whatever. And I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know if maybe she had bigger problems than I thought, and maybe the two of them were going to get into something. I mean, part of me kind of hoped that was going to happen so I could get the situation out of my hands. Mm-hmm. But she in her mind was always free to do whatever she wanted. So when she wasn't available, if I did something, she would call me up and rip me up one side and down the other and give me a hard time. She was always wanted to know where I was. She was that type of person. And it turns out I do not say any of this in blame to her. I say this as just to describe what I went through. But she had a personality disorder, I came to realize. I'm not a qualified person to make any type of judgment about that. But I came to realize this through the help of one of my friends. Because he talked to another one of his friends and said, after I told him some of the things happening, he's like, wow, she needs therapy. So at this point, I started telling her that, look, you got to get therapy. He's like, oh, I don't need therapy, you do, blah, blah. And it was always such that, whatever she did was fine, and I could never do anything right, So here I am, I'm reflecting on this. I've spent my whole life in service to Jehovah. I have always been led to believe that I'm going to be blessed for my service to Jehovah. And in the times when I'm doing the most for Jehovah, I repeatedly look and I repeatedly see those were the worst times of my life.
Yeah.
I had such a miserable life in a lot of ways because I was always taking time away from myself to do Jehovah's things.
Yeah.
I was with individuals who were abusive. And then when I finally get my reward, it's a wife who, not because of her own fault, but basically is extremely abusive.
Yeah.
So this was my reality. I was indoctrinated enough that someone had, check this. How can you think this is real anymore? Do I need to tell you anything else?
Yeah. So, well, that's like our aha moment is like when our good friend Deep Throat said, I actually believe Jesus died on a cross, and it's like, what? And as soon as oh, I get it. There's the reality check. That's why, boom, there it is. Now all of the puzzle pieces have all come together.
Yeah, so finally when I realized in a strange way, my ex-wife was the answer to my prayer because I prayed for someone to help me serve God better. Lo and behold, I got her. So 6 months into the marriage, I talked to the brother that had actually married us, and I told him what was going on, and this was at an assembly. I almost broke down in tears talking to this guy because I was having a hard time holding it together at this point. Here I'm still an elder, still doing all this work, and I'm going home, and instead of getting support, I'm I've got a boat anchor that I'm dragging with me. My home is not a home anymore. And so I was like, well, the first year of marriage is hard. I'm like, huh?
Yeah, what?
So anyway, somewhere along the point, I figured out that she had this personality disorder. I was researching on the line. I said something I entered something like dealing with my crazy wife, and something came up about different personality disorders. Holy crap. So I got this book and I read it. I'm like, yeah, check, maybe, check. Okay, close, check. I'm like, wow, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
So I was telling him this one day because she had another roommate. I didn't know this till after the fact, but she had a roommate who had gone to the elders because it was so tumultuous living with my ex-wife. Yeah. Nobody ever told me that. So anyways, I was talking to the same brother. I'm like, well, here's what I found. I would like to go tell this person it wasn't their fault, because this is what she's got. And he says to me, well, you shouldn't be bitterly angry with your wife.
Wow.
I'm like, bitterly angry? I'm like, she has something beyond her control, and I want to share this with this person so they know it wasn't their fault. How is that being bitterly angry? And at that point, I almost got bitterly angry with him for being such an
Yeah, for being such an idiot, huh?
yeah, but the problem was, I came to realize the JW, the Watchtower, does not understand anything about the way emotions work at all.
No,
And
no.
for those of us who are most indoctrinated also don't understand anything about the way emotions work. What we're taught to do with our emotions is shut them off, to not be a real person,
Yeah.
to toe the line. Instead of emotions, like just rely on prayer, study, meditation, and meeting attendance. And all those are indoctrination techniques.
Yeah.
So when problems come up, just go indoctrinate yourself more. So anyways, at a year into the marriage, I again asked the same brother for help, and he repeated the same thing. Well, the first year of marriage is difficult. And like, all right, so basically I have to go this alone. And I did the good JW thing, and I started to study to strengthen my faith. And since I'd always had an issue with 1914, that's where I started.
Oh no.
And I mean, that's an open and shut case when you see the level of evidence.
Yeah.
All right, so we're wrong about 1914. I'm like, well, maybe this is still God's organization. But then you're like, well, if they're wrong about 1914, then that means Christ never selected them. Then you start seeing some of the old literature, the stuff they taught, like, why do they have to be dishonest about what they used to teach? And
Yeah.
more things start coming up. And then you cross that threshold of, well, if I've been misled about all this stuff, then what do apostates, what are they really like? I'm a spiritually mature guy, I'm an elder.
Yeah.
I'll be able to tell if they're lying.
I can handle these guys.
Like, I really want to know. I'm like, well, obviously I've been misled here. So what are these guys like? Are they really these angry, bitter, hateful people? And of course, when you start watching videos, you get the full range of everything.
You do.
For the most part, you see that these are honest people that had serious issues, and they weren't out to promote themselves or to go live a debauched lifestyle. They just, and that's what I got. I'm like, huh. And I read Crisis of Conscience. I'm like, I recognize the governing body. I'm like, I served on a body village like those guys.
Yeah.
It all came together. And
Yeah.
I was so indoctrinated, though. I've said this before. For me, it was like waking up in an entirely different universe. It was a sense of surrealness. It was hard to explain.
Yeah.
I don't know. Different people will have different experiences depending on how indoctrinated they are. But when I woke up, I was still an elder. So to some extent, I still had to toe the line, but I tried to do it in a way where I wasn't browbeating people. I tried to be more fellow-feeling and, well, just do what you can type stuff. Meanwhile, I would just sit in the back of the hall and read the Bible during the meetings. Which, when you read the Bible, especially the New Testament, all you get is a condemnation of the governing body again. I'm like, man, these guys are going to have it coming to them.
Yeah. I never quite heard anybody put it that way. You read the New Testament and you get the condemnation of the governing body.
That's a good one.
That's a very good one.
Big time. Big time. I just
Yeah.
sat there in the Kingdom Hall realizing this.
Yeah.
Like, I would go to service meetings and read the Bible and realize this. I'm like, wow, these guys they're in some deep doo-doo. I hate to be them. So anyways, at this point, I realized something. I'm like, I was indoctrinated enough where, had I known what I known and had a good wife, I might have stayed in.
Yeah.
But my life was a living hell. I would not have survived as a person had I remained in that marriage. Everything that I needed, wanted in a wife, she could never be, and I could never be the type of person that she would need. And it was gonna get ugly if I stayed there. So I had no other option. And now that I've left, it's the best thing I've ever done. I mean, I went through a period of extreme insanity, if you will. I mean, call it an episode, whatever. But it was like I felt like I was watching someone else live my life for a while. I was paranoid that they were going to track me down, and for a long time they did try to, but I just kept blowing them off. But on the other side of it is like all the fear, all the guilt, all the shame started to melt away, and you get the chance to really explore who you are.
Yeah.
Because those of us who have been in such a group for any amount of time don't really know ourselves, even if we do. Myself, I knew myself pretty good, and I'm still the same person that I've always been. But I now have the freedom to make my own decisions and to form my own opinions about things, whereas before I never really did.
Right.
So I'm not going to say I'm a different person, but by the same token, I still had to spend a fair amount of time getting to know myself.
Yeah.
and it's part of the healing process. So going through all this, having my experience, knowing what I knew, I felt responsible to share this for individuals that are going to need to see the same type of stuff that I did.
Yeah.
When I woke up, I spent months going over the same stuff again and again and again. As I wanted to prove it to myself. I prayed like I had never prayed before. I'm like, Jehovah, make this obvious to me. And yeah, after doing that same thing for months, I was finally like, there's nothing I can do here. So
Yeah.
this is reality. That's not reality.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
that's what happened. And then my ex-wife now. So the first time she ever actually made an attempt at being a good wife was after I told her I wanted a divorce.
Wow.
Too little, too late. So
Yeah.
now we're divorced. I'm not going to go through all that stuff, but even the divorce process, she did some stuff that was reflective of her condition. So now she's off on her own. I don't want anyone to know who she is. I don't want this to come back on her in any way, shape, or form. I don't hold her responsible because when you have a condition like she does, it causes you to react in those ways.
Yeah.
And my honest hope for her is that she gets the help that she needs, and that she's able to deal with her condition and to move on in a positive way. And whether I imagine that she's going to continue to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, that's her decision. I personally don't care, don't want to know. But despite the fact that I'm not angry with her, it's still, there's so much built up there that I don't want to see her again.
Yeah.
I don't want down that path. I wish her well, but I just don't want to in any way, shape, or form have anything to do with her. But
Yeah.
this is what it took to wake me up. I had to go through literally hell. I was that indoctrinated. So there are people. My approach to putting the information out there is with people like me in mind.
Yeah.
A lot of different types of approaches work, but I do it specifically for people like me that are waking up and are really not sure about things. And I do it with the idea that there are some people you won't be able to reach until, like J.W. Fairytale put it on the Vast Apostate Hour, you have to have your Armageddon.
Yeah.
And
I was just thinking that, yeah.
that was a really good way to put it. I mean, I kind of did have my Armageddon.
We all
And-
did. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. That was a good way to put it. And you can't make someone else have their Armageddon, especially if they're super indoctrinated.
Yeah.
So that being the case, that's my approach. But one thing I like, though, is that there's so many different people with so many different approaches. They're going to reach a number of different people. So I
Yeah.
encourage anybody. The one thing I don't encourage is don't do anything illegal and don't do anything violent. Beyond that, whatever method you use that's legal, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is that even in the door-to-door work, that's why Watchtower has so many different presentations, because even they recognize there's not one presentation that's going to entrap everybody. That's why they change it every month, different articles, because it's a different appeal to different mindsets, and we have to work in just that same, or have that same mental attitude about waking people up. It's a bunch of different personalities. So there are some people that are more attracted to us and maybe not as attracted to you, and vice versa. More people are attracted to you and they shy away from folks like Kim and I. But
Think you were crazy.
yeah, but the whole big picture is that we're trying to reach everybody, and that's why I would encourage anybody that has stories similar to this, that has to use a phrase, the intestinal fortitude to put their face in front of the camera and say, here, Watchtower, I'm not afraid no more. These are my experiences, and these are not a singular experience. We've all experienced this. And the more people that you hear with similar experiences combats the mindset when the elders say, now you have to trust us, because you weren't sitting in that back room when the decision was made to disfellowship this person, because now everybody, because of the internet and the secretly recorded judicial hearings, everybody's seeing exactly now what goes on behind these closed doors, and people can for themselves say, hey, wait a minute, what you're telling me in a platform and what I'm witnessing firsthand is all crap.
Yeah.
So it all works with everybody's different personalities.
Yes. And this is a thing I've been trying to encourage more lately, is just those of us who have left to get our experience out there somehow. If you make a video, if you can do that, great. I understand, though, there's a lot of reasons not to. I mean, obviously, on my channel, I don't show my face. If you can do that, fine. Some people can't do that. If you can have a blog, fine, do that. There are some great blogs out there.
Yeah.
If you can do that, fine. But if there's something you can do just to share the experience of here's what it's really like to be a Jehovah's Witness. This greatest life ever. Well, not really. Here's what really goes on. And
Right.
those of us that look back, I realize as a witness, especially like the higher up you get, you are taught to put on a front of being happy all the time. So you go to the pioneer school and they teach you that, you've got to be encouraging, you've got to be happy because that's the way you're going to get more pioneers. But when you work with the pioneers and you are a pioneer, you see that most of them really aren't as happy as they pretend to be.
No.
Same deal with the elders. They're told to, you've got to be warm and loving and encouraging. And some are just downright assholes because they can get away with it now.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you can realize very much that the happiness that you see as Jehovah's Witnesses is a front for the most part. No doubt there are people that really are that happy as witnesses, but in my experience, that number would be 75% or greater are not happy at all.
Yeah.
I was not happy. I was always stressed out. I was frustrated because we were told if you do things this way, this is what's going to happen. That never happened. I always busted my hump for doing watchtower activities, and I watched people that were slacking off and fooling around having better lives than me.
Yeah.
They would find the person they worked with and get married, and then after they were married, then they would start doing JW stuff, and it always worked out better that way. So
Yeah.
this was extremely frustrating to me, and this is what I want to make. Yeah, so that's why I want to let people know what it's really like to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And personally, if people decide that's what they want to do, I don't think that anybody of their own free volition would decide to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right.
But at the same point, I'm not going to be what they were, and I'm not going to force someone to make a decision or tell them what decision they have to make.
Yeah.
Because unlike the governing body, I don't want anyone to follow me. I have no, and this is something I think about this. If you want to know who the Watchtower is, read their description of apostates. They are projecting their personality onto apostates. That is who they are. And think about the way they talk about it. They're like, do they think they know more than the governing body? What are we, in kindergarten?
Yeah.
Let's get real. Like, why can't they draw followers off after themselves? Why can't they get their own followers? Hello, governing body, what are you doing? You're knocking on the doors of Catholics and drawing off followers after yourself.
Exactly. In fact, I think Kim and I even did a video about that one time because that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. Then, on top of that, like, you're running ahead of the organization. Wait a minute, let me get this straight. So you're doing something wrong, and instead of me doing what's going to please God, you'd rather I do something wrong just so that I don't run ahead of the organization. Once again, are we in kindergarten?
Well, see, now there again, that brings up a good issue because we recently uploaded a video about a week ago or so where a friend is talking to a Jehovah's Witness at one of the literature carts, and you heard this Jehovah's Witness say, I would rather be wrong and with the congregation than to be by myself and away from the congregation. It's like, hello, if the congregation jumps off a bridge, are you going to go jump off with them?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the mentality.
I have a question for you, Spike. We had heard a couple of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that there was elders meetings where they were actually instructing the elders to, even if we're wrong, it's not our responsibility. The governing body will take the fall for this. So basically, it gives the impression that you're not responsible to Jehovah if something goes wrong or you're wrong. It will be, the higher up's fault.
That attitude is very much so driven through the entire organization. And the way the organization is structured is that if you are of a certain rank, you have to follow those above you because ultimately it's their responsibility. So if you said, well, I did this because so-and-so said so or whatever, that's one thing. But it gets to be really tough because there's a lot of elders that run off and do their own thing. But as a congregation member, you still to some extent have to respect their authority according to the way the governing body has set things up. So to some extent, I thoroughly believe that theme runs through the entire organization. So another thing I've recently thought about to help people to expose the organization for what it is the whole term worldly people that we used to use.
Yeah.
I really want to advocate the understanding that that is roughly equivalent to racism. Because when a Jehovah's Witness calls somebody worldly, there's a connotation that even if they're a good person, they're still a bad person because they're not serving Jehovah. But the average worldly person is probably fornicating, they're probably doing drugs, they're probably lying, they're probably cheating, they're probably stealing. This is something you are taught to assume if you are one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
You know, I had this friend that he semi-woke up. So some people will semi-wake up, but they'll be too afraid to wake all the way up and leave. He semi-woke up, and he's like, well, oh, I don't want this person to go in the world because the world is such a horrible place, and blah, 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 blah. And that vision that we were given of the world is totally false.
Right.
Most people in the world, I want to call them normal people now, because the term worldly is an abhorrent term to me. Normal people are on the average much better than the average Jehovah's Witness.
Well, you know, that was something that I noticed, you know, doing the mountain man thing, because I would have to go, and of course I was able to convince myself that it was okay because I went as a businessman. I was, you know, making products to these people, and, you know, the knives and the tomahawks and the leather goods, and selling them. So I actually went with the mindset of being a businessman, and I could actually trick myself into saying it's okay to associate with these worldly people because this is business, right? And I've been doing this for about 26 years now, but early on, that was the one thing that was a huge contrast between the Watchtower indoctrination and what my perspective of the world was, because now I'm with people that really loved Christ, really loved God, and worked really hard to show their love for God, which was demonstrated towards people in the camp. I mean, I saw people sharing food like nobody's business. Their alcohol, and, you know, all of us know that alcohol is not really cheap. I mean, it's really not. It's an expensive luxury. But I saw so much sharing, so much giving, so much of worldly people willing to help and willing to see that you, as even a businessman, became successful in what you were doing. And to me, it was such a huge eye-opener, because here I am sitting around a campfire. We're admiring the beauty and the depth of the heavens. Oh, did you see that shooting star? Well, there goes another one there. And it's like, and I'm sitting here thinking, my God, I've got to condemn all these people to death because they're not serving Jehovah. To me, that was just a huge contrast. And in fact, we became very close to another couple, Bill and Margaret. And Margaret has since passed on. And this happened at a time when Kim got sick. And the brothers in the congregation would not come out and visit us, except for two, because they were afraid to give her an
attack?
A chemically induced attack. They were afraid of that. And because of that, we were never, ever invited to Jehovah's Witnesses' homes for a meal, because they were so afraid to make her sick. Now, here's this worldly couple, people that we've condemned to death if they don't become a Jehovah Witness. And this couple said, look, we know you and Kim don't celebrate Christmas. We respect that. But would you have any objections coming over to our house on Christmas and have a meal with us? We won't talk about Christmas. We won't do anything. It's just that it's convenient because we all have this day off from work. And then they said, now we know Kim has a problem with chemicals. Tell us what we have to do to make that happen. Now here's people that we've condemned to eternal damnation willing to make their life inconvenient to have us over for a meal. And this is the same thing that Jehovah's Witnesses should be doing, but they're not doing. And to me, that was a huge eye-opener.
There's a second thing that occurred to me along the way that was interesting. But if you talk to one of Jehovah's Witnesses and you start talking a lot about Jesus Christ instead of Jehovah, they'll start to look at you like something's wrong.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
If you read the New Testament, it's pretty obvious that the name that's important is Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
You know, on top of that, if you read their own appendix in their Bible, they say, well, yeah, that the name Jehovah is really not in any ancient manuscripts, but we think it should be because.
Yeah.
You know, so the thing is, using that argument, if the name Jehovah really was that important, and if it got removed from the most ancient manuscripts, how can you trust anything in the Bible?
Right.
So if their argument is correct, the Bible is not trustworthy, and there's no point of believing it.
Yeah, and this has been my argument as the next JW, that as a JW we are indoctrinated that God made positive steps to protect His Word, to make sure that His Word survived all these centuries and everything else. And now that we're out, I can freely say this: then how come He didn't stop the false name Jehovah from getting put in this Bible? Yeah. And even Watchtower admits that this is not a historical name. Even Watchtower admits that it comes from a Catholic monk. And then we just recently did another video with the forward of the
Watchtower printed Byington Living English Bible. It says that name is a blunder.
It's a blunder. So even if Watchtower admits this, then that shows that God didn't do anything to protect His Word, because this false name got put in it.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's very easy once you're awake to point out the numerous doctrinal errors of the Watchtower. Yeah. And it's almost laughable. At some point, I think everybody that wakes up goes back and like, how did I ever believe that?
Yeah.
We did. And I had this friend who I was really close with for a number of decades. He had gotten himself into a bad marriage. He was a couple of years older than me. Anyways, he had gone to Bethel for a little bit. He came back. He was a quirky guy. He was a good guy, but kind of quirky. Anyway, so he finally got married. And this woman that he married had issues along the same lines as my wife, ex-wife, not the same thing. So their marriage as well was an abusive marriage. And, this almost broke him as an individual. They ended up getting divorced. He ended up living someplace alone because he was watching a piece of family property. And he was basically sliding down the hill towards becoming an alcoholic. He was falling off the face of the earth. He was drinking himself silly on a regular basis. So myself, at this time being a good friend, I'm like, well, why don't you come live with me? I had the space. I got him back on track. We had a great time together, but he needed some rehabilitation because like his view of reality and grasp of reality was sketchy even for one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So he got to the point of being functional. He got himself a nice girl to marry, and they're happy together. He's one of the few people I ever talked to in any way, shape, or form. I told him one day, this was after I'd stopped going to meetings, I said, listen, I know this isn't true anymore. I'm not going to do this. I want you to know I'm still your friends from this point on. I said I'm not going to answer any questions about why for at least a year, because I wanted to give him time to decide whether or not he wanted to know something. Yeah. I said, I care about you. We're still friends from this point on, though. Our friendship is totally up to you. I wanted to leave it. No, I said, I don't want you to follow me. I'm not trying to bring you. But if you want to see where I'm coming from, I put this photocopy of a Wake article down, and he goes, wouldn't even look at it.
Wow.
Wouldn't even look. I'm like, that's the Awake. I'm like, that's the Awake that you're not looking at right there. I didn't write that. And I talked about how the end wasn't coming. He's like, oh, I know that some people believe that. I'm like, you know that some people believe that? I'm like, I didn't write the Live Forever book. I'm like, we both grew up in the 80s. You remember how Armageddon was supposed to be here before the generation that saw the events of 1914 passed away. I didn't write that stuff. I didn't make that stuff up. And he just kind of, mind shut off like JWs do. So this is having a friend that close that I had helped that much and seeing that response. It's kind of, once again, it very much so deeply hit me that there's only so much we can do, especially with the people that we know. So we would love it if we could just go into a Kingdom Hall and stand up and give the apostate public talk. Yeah. Here's the real truth, people, but it won't necessarily work. But you have all these experiences, and I think it's good to share them and to talk about them because we all have a similar experience like that, where we in our heads we're like, why can't you see? But then we've got to remember, well, that was us at one point.
Yeah. See, and that's what our main thing is not to focus so much on coming up with a magic phrase to wake everybody up, because it just doesn't exist.
We don't wake anybody up. No, they have to have that in their mind first to even click on, the blog or a video or something like that.
And that's why, before Kim and I upload a video, we always try to come up with a title that makes the Jehovah's Witness, feel compelled. Just like the last two that we uploaded, we entitled them JWs Can't Say This Anymore. We went to their website, pulled something off of jw.org, and directly contradicted it with what they're saying with this year's district convention. And it's like, so as a Jehovah Witness, well, wait a minute. I know this is an apostate, but, if I'm going to, combat this type of mindset even at the door, what is it that I have to, be aware of? And boom, then they hear it, and it's like, oh, wait, you're absolutely right. We can't say that no more because this year's district convention contradicts what's printed on jw.org. And there again, for Kim and I personally, and I'm sure you probably feel the same way because we alluded to this a little earlier, is that our main goal is to be here and just kind of help those along that are having their Armageddon moment, because it's okay to be where we're at today. There is no condemnation. And there again, this is one of the reasons why I still like using the New Testament, is because
New World Translation.
Well, the New Testament and the New World Translation, because like you, if you really read into that, Jesus said, if you believe in me and that God raised me, or the Father raised me from the dead, you will not be judged. Those words should take the absolute fear of God away. And this is how these cults operate, is they actually operate on indoctrinating that fear of God. Oh, I better not do this because, God's going to kill me in Armageddon. Or going back to the negative connotation of being worldly. When somebody leaves the organization, a close friend, what do you usually say? Well, he went back to the world. And it's already automatically presumed they're living an immoral life, they're smoking, they're drinking, they're doing all of these things because Watchtower has implanted the bad connotation of what the world is. And the world is not like that. Well, let's just get real. Being an elder, have you had to deal with Jehovah's Witnesses for smoking?
No, I was actually aware, though, of one of my friends knew an elder who smoked.
Okay. Have you had to deal with Jehovah's Witnesses that were drinking?
Maybe once or twice.
Have you had to deal with Jehovah's Witnesses that committed immorality?
That was the biggest one.
How about apostasy?
I never did. I was the first one I had to deal with that did that. So.
But
I count myself very
yeah. But what I'm getting at is the picture that Watchtower paints the world. Jehovah's Witnesses are living that very lifestyle, because even when we was up in Wisconsin,
Upstanding, clean, moral organization, and the elders keep it clean.
There's a different level to that too, though. Is the type of stuff that gets judicial is the vast majority of times will have to do with sins of a sexual nature, because that's what the Watchtower fixates on.
Yeah.
But if you read 1 Corinthians 6:9-10, there's a bunch of other sins that are in that same category. So if they're going to apply that principle, they should apply it to a number of other things.
Yeah.
Like, for example, how often have you heard Jehovah's Witnesses revile each other? How often have you seen them extort or cheat each other? I've dealt with.
I've been part of that. Yeah.
My ex-wife, she was a reviler. She reviled me. So she's already committed what should have been a disfellowshipping offense, but they never track that stuff down.
Or how about greed? When's the last time you've ever heard of a JW getting disfellowship? Because, let's just face it, we all go to a buffet. So is it the second trip becomes greed back up to the buffet? Is it the third trip up? Or is it the third trip plus going for dessert? How do you qualify getting disfellowship for being a greedy person? That's why Watchtower can't do that, because they have no way to qualify greedy.
Well, talking about greed, what about bad business dealings? Oh my God, for 36 years we've having to deal with elders and bad business dealings.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because when we was in Cottonwood, and we had a brother come in that professed to be of the anointed, and this guy, he put on a good show, because he would give a prayer from the platform and literally break down and cry while giving a prayer. That's how heartfelt his prayers were.
He would have made a good televangelist.
Oh yeah, this guy would have been great for that. But now here's a guy that professed to be of the anointed, and yet this is the same guy that confessed to Kim and I that my mother was the Jezebel influence in the congregation. Now, if she's a Jezebel influence, how come they didn't throw her out the window to the dogs? That's what I gotta ask. You know, if this elder can recognize this trait, then why was she never disfellowshipped for it?
This is we had an elder's wife at one time that was considered to be a Jezebel influence. Nothing was done.
Yeah.
You know, this whole myth that the witnesses are the most moral people is actually far from true.
Yeah.
And experience, they're actually oftentimes worse people than normal people.
Yeah.
You know, and I believe so the normal average like emotionally healthy person is typically not going to be recruited. Like the way that people are recruited is when they have something that is disturbing their life and they're looking for an out.
Yeah.
Or if there's something going on that they're just looking for something. And then, you know, the JW's knocking on the door. There's going to be paradise tomorrow. God's going to wave his magic wand. All the evil doers will be dead, and we'll all have pet panda bears. You know, it's like, oh, great. So I don't have to put up with this. So that's when you get trapped.
And that really becomes a numbers game, doesn't it? Because there are a certain amount of people.
So on top of that, what happens is you get trapped when you're in this emotionally low state.
Yep.
And then instead of building you up, they start to emotionally abuse you. You know, so if you have the tendency to have any of these emotional issues, they're going to be brought out because suddenly instead of, you know, you're thinking you're in this happy environment, but really you're being abused. You're being told you're worthless. You're not working hard enough. If you make one mistake, God's going to kill you, and, you know, so on and so forth. The movies you watch are bad. The music you listen to is bad, and your entertainment is bad. Everyone in the world is bad. So it in my opinion, it exacerbates bad emotional situations and makes them become, you know, maybe personality disorders.
Yeah.
Or maybe people that have personality disorders are more susceptible to being recruited.
Yeah.
See, and that's what we were talking a little bit yesterday with the kids about patterns. Watchtower is instilling these patterns, and one of the biggest patterns is that they're right, everyone else is wrong, and that's why when a lot of us wake up, one of those patterns is still inculcated in us, is that, you know, if you don't now believe the XJW who becomes an atheist, you're wrong and you're going to become a subject of a public browbeating. And this is a pattern that's instilled by Watchtower. I'm right. This is a proven fact. Take it or leave it. And then, you know, if you don't like it, well, delete, unfriend. But this is a pattern of behavior that needs to be broken.
And it's not just a certain, you know, label, but any belief that goes against what, you know, another one may believe. You know, this pattern is instilled.
Even political views. I mean, that's... And
so that's something that, especially those of us who have been in a high control group, we have to deal with the fact that we've had things instilled into our personality that causes us to react in these unhealthy ways. And part of waking up, you have to go through a time period where you begin to work these things out of your personality.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're the type of person that really wants to be that jerk, if you really are that jerk, I mean, fine, I don't want to deal with you. You know, go make someone else's life miserable. I've had enough of that.
yeah.
For the rest of us, we have to realize that we have some of these things still in us. I recognize myself. There are things that just trigger responses because the Watchtower trained us to have triggered responses. And it takes a while for us to recognize that, to focus on that, and to work those things out of our personality. So a number of people that have left, they advocate getting therapy when you leave, because all of us who have been Jehovah's Witnesses, no matter how indoctrinated we were, from the least to the most, have just been in the equivalent of an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
From the day you step foot in the Kingdom Hall, you are being emotionally abused. You know, even if you want to bring it back further, from the day they knock on your door, you are being set up for emotional abuse. So this is not healthy. This is not normal. It leaves us with scars. It leaves us with injuries. And we have to work through that in a positive way. Well, I kind of believe that to some extent we'll have remnants of this throughout our life.
Yeah.
If you look at the Australian Commission, Paul Grundy was interviewed on TV, and you saw him go right back to his witness vocabulary. And this is a guy that, I mean, if anybody knows their stuff, it's him.
Yeah.
So we have had a massive injury done to us that we're going to have to deal with, and we're going to have to attend to it, and we're going to have to realize that we give ourselves the freedom to do that, and it's a crucial part of the healing process.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And holding some ex-JWs accountable to that is not really, in my opinion, a good direction in healing. All
Yeah.
it does is it just continues to tear down instead of
Yes.
working towards a healing process. And I think you'll probably agree with me that most psychologists in the world are just now really becoming or coming up to speed about how damaging cults are to the human psyche.
Yes.
And there's not really a lot of therapists out there that know how to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's the second thing that makes it difficult is most people do not realize what the Watchtower is. Now, they don't realize, like, they see these nicely dressed people who put on a nice face. If you want to be honest about the Watchtower and about Jehovah's Witnesses, their religion centers on putting on a good face, to make themselves look good to people. And behind the scenes, to a large extent, they don't really care if you're the biggest jerk ever. I mean, so long as you toe their line, you go and you advertise their literature, and you look nice doing it. That's on some level, that's all they care about. So those of us who have the knowledge and experience have to say, no, this is who the Watchtower really is. And Jehovah's Witnesses, every single one of them are victims of this group. So we don't want to approach them not from the position that you're responsible for this, but from the position that you are entrapped in something beyond your knowledge,
Right.
and you are a victim of it. And we're here to provide that help and that support to those who are going to be working with them, and also to provide the knowledge to the community at large so that we can get the understanding out there about groups like Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. Kim and I was watching some videos on TV yesterday afternoon late, and it's really interesting just to observe, and I don't know if you've observed this yourself, but this is something that Kim and I have observed. In all the cults out there, when you go on the internet and research Scientology, it's been my experience that you don't see page after page after page after page of Scientology apostates or Catholics. You're going to see a few, yes. Then when you do research on Mormonism, you don't see page after page after page after page of Mormon apostates. But yet, when you type in Jehovah's Witnesses, you've got page after page after page after
Thousands
page of apostates.
Yeah.
Why does this religion have so much that's in the public view to stay away from these people? I mean, it's just an interesting observation.
Well, Mikey, isn't this obvious? It's because they're the ones who are really following Christ.
True. Oh, I stand corrected.
So with Scientology, though, you're dealing with a much smaller religion. I mean,
Yes.
I think they have in the order of tens of thousands.
Right.
So statistically wise, you won't have as many people leaving.
Right.
And when you have a smaller group, they're not going to be as vocal. They're starting to get to that point. They actually have had movies made about them.
Yep.
I applaud them. But part of that, too, is because they pander towards a much wealthier demographic of society.
Right.
And that's who they recruit. So that's why there's less for there. For Mormons, I don't know why that is. My sister became one. Good for her. But anyways, with them, I don't know if they're as abusive as the Watchtower is. I get the sense that they're not.
Right.
On top of that,
Yep.
they set their followers up to actually live successful lives.
That's
they advocate education. And to some extent, I don't think they steal the entire life away from you to the level that the Watchtower does.
Right. Because
So-
just let me interject something. That's why you have the terminology Jack Mormon. You can still be a Mormon, but you don't have to toe that real rigid line, and you can still have your family and everything else, but there's no terminology for, well, I'm a Jack JW. There is no leeway or any terminology for that, and maybe that's part of the reason why.
Yeah. I think that the Watchtower is more abusive than the Mormons. I can't make a statement as to how much because I've never been a Mormon. I thoroughly have no desire to ever be one, so I'm probably not going to find out. But having been a witness, it's like when I look back and I realized that the first half of my life was stolen from me. I was basically a Watchtower slave. I made this significant decisions in my life based upon how they would have me make them instead of based upon how I would make them myself.
Yeah.
So that affected my choice of family, and it affected everything. And if I was living my own free life, my life might look much different now. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, you just about
and-
bet it would be.
Yeah. So that being the case is the Watchtower says that those who leave are bitter and angry and blah blah blah. But the deal is, when someone has stolen from you something that cannot be returned in any way, shape, or form, they've taken something irreplaceable.
Yep.
You have the right to be bitter and angry with them. You have that right. But the problem is, you can't allow that to rule your life, because you've had this taken from you. They took it from you. They don't care that they abused you that way. They're going to continue to abuse you, because that's what they do. So you can take that and say, yep, I have the right to be bitter and angry, but you know something? If I live my life that way, they won.
They want,
So
yeah.
the way that we do that is we put our stories out there. We say, yep, this is what happened. Am I bitter? Am I angry? Yeah, I have the right to be. But you know what? I'm not going to live as a bitter and angry person. I'm going to take the rest of my life. I'm going to live it the way that I want. I'm going to acknowledge the fact that I have the right to be angry, but I can't let that anger run my life. And I've got to work to a place where I'm happy and I'm satisfied, because the best revenge you can get on them is to be a happy, satisfied person.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you, did you want to talk about your mom and that experience at all?
Yeah, so that's kind of unfolding. I'll keep that one under wraps, but I'll put it this way: she was a pillar in the congregation.
Enough said.
We look forward to that story in the future then.
Yeah. I'll let her tell her own version.
Yeah, let her know that we'd be more than happy to make her a nail on the coffin lid.
Yeah, I think that's coming. So we'll
Good. Good.
To some level, I'm trying to keep that under wraps, because I mean that's she's figuring out what she wants to do. It's a tough period.
Yeah, it is. It is for all of us.
When you spend 30, 35 years, under mind control, and you form legitimate bonds with these people, and that they are your friends. But the problem is, their version of friendship has limits. It has a stop point.
Yeah.
They can be your friend up until this point, and then when you get to that point, their friendship means they want you to go back over here again. And if you don't, then they're not your friend.
Yeah.
So a lot of us interpret that as, well, they were never really my friend. It's easy to think that, but I think the real thing is they were as much of your friend as they were allowed to be. And this is another aspect of the mind control. They didn't set out to be a jerk, but it's just that they follow the rules, and the rules are you have to be a jerk.
Yeah.
And so that's what they do.
Yeah, it's just like that video that's been leaked from the convention. We mentioned that earlier, about the shunning.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And,
And watch that when they clapped after that. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah, they actually clapped. Unbelievable. Yeah.
Someone paused it just right where, like, one of the brothers was looking at her when she got this fellowship. He had this scowl on his face like that. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God. Look at that face. That is
Yeah.
a Jehovah's Witness right there. That scowl is a Jehovah's Witness. That is not a loving person.
Now, this is what you got to ask yourself, because, Watchtower scripted that scene out. So did they script in somebody giving that scowl?
Probably.
See, that's what you've got to ask. That's what you've got to ask.
Dude, nothing goes on at those conventions that is not carefully choreographed.
Yep.
If you think they're going to make a video of Bethel and not have it even more carefully choreographed, you are fooling yourself.
Exactly.
Every single person was told how to look in that video. I guarantee you.
Guarantee it. Now, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but we uploaded a video yesterday regarding another one of those secretly leaked videos that Watchtower put out, and it was a brother that was appointed as the temporary circuit overseer, not temporary substitute circuit overseer. You see, this language is getting out of my mind because I can't remember the terminology as well as I used to, which is good. But so of course the way, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but the way they set it up, they've got a couple that are congratulating him and him being appointed as substitute circuit overseer. Why don't you come over to my house for a meal? So they've got, a dozen or so friends, a half a dozen, whatever. But I found it interesting. In one of the scenes, they have the table set. And the first thing you see is a glass, one of those tall, straight glasses, not a wine glass, just a tall, straight drinking glass. Mm-hmm. And it's filled with a reddish color liquid.
That looks like Kool-Aid.
That looks like Kool-Aid. And then you see a plate of meat come in, and then another plate of meat. And this whole scene lasts for just a few short seconds, and it kind of like pans straight across the screen, and as it's panning, the liquid in the Kool-Aid jar and the glass goes down. And it's like, what are they saying? Are they getting ready to drink the Kool-Aid? Are they, I mean, what? Because like you just said, Watchtower does not put these videos out unless there's absolutely a specific meaning behind everything. Even that brother scowling at the young girl that got disfellowshipped.
Yeah, as I think about it, here's my thought on that. What they want to do is they probably want to portray the range of ways people react. So if you look at one of the sisters in the background, it's like, oh, you know, poor you, and like, you know, you can see the hurt on her face. This other guy, he's just an angry, bitter old jerk, you know. So there's, to some extent, they know that they have lots of angry, bitter old jerks, and you're told that, oh, when that angry, bitter old jerk is a jerk to you, well, it's your job to forgive them and put up with the fact that.
Well, look at, you know, that Watchtower study they had the week of Mother's Day. It is your own fault. You know, the mother left. Her pain is her own fault because she won't return to Jehovah. So this is the whole, you know, mindset that they're inculcating.
You know, the funny thing is when you think about it, by the true meaning that is supposed to be return to Jehovah, of course, to them, return to Jehovah means return to the organization. But
right.
The true meaning of return to Jehovah, meaning standing on the side of truth, all of us are more so in the truth than anybody that is in the truth.
yeah.
Being for the real truth.
Yes.
And in case we are far more truthful than they have the ability to be. So the issue of returning to Jehovah is actually ironic because for what that is really supposed to mean, not the cult meeting, they're the ones that need to return to Jehovah.
Yeah, because, you know, I mean, and we've discussed this before, that when, as ex-members, and we're putting ourselves out there, exposing Watchtower, we are purposely holding ourselves to a higher level of accountability than what Watchtower even holds himself to.
Well, you know, look at those in the XJW community, the concern they have for the welfare of the children.
Yeah.
It's far more concern than the members of the organization. I mean, they're ready to let children's lives be destroyed, also that their organization looks good. But the ironic fact about that is it makes their organization look like the horrible, evil construct that it is because they don't care about anybody.
Yeah.
But we do.
Yeah, exactly. So, which is a good thing. If it's anybody that you can trust, Jehovah's Witnesses, it's an apostate.
Not necessarily. Let's be honest there.
No, I know. No, I'm just being, what's the word I want? Facetious.
But on the average, apostates are far more trustworthy than Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes.
We tell the truth.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, there is a very discernible line there, isn't there?
Well, that's the thing is, you know, if somebody sends me something or I come across a post or a blog or something, if they have information, you know, I am really careful, especially now even more so, is I go get the actual quote in the literature. And if I can't find it, then, you know, we won't use it.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, this has been great getting some of this older literature, is because I look it up myself. You know, I want to read for myself because we have to be extra careful, you know, when we're quoting something, you know, and quote where it comes from.
Well, it's in there again, and that's part of the Watchtower indoctrination and all this perception that they've built in the minds of current Jehovah's Witnesses, is that, you know, we're lying to them. We're fabricating lies. But when you read the stuff right from their literature, hey, I didn't write this. Watchtower wrote this.
The plain. Oh, go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say, you know, that's why we were disfellowshipped. You know, you were talking earlier about serious sin and stuff. You know, we were disfellowshipped because we look in the literature and say, hey, what's up with this demon face, or what's up with this penis? And, you know, the elders show up here and it's like, why would you show your brother? Why would you be talking about this? We're not the ones that put this in the literature.
Yeah.
You know, so we're disfellowshipped for this, you know, and you talk about evidence, and they wouldn't even follow their own rules. And,
of course not.
You know, everybody knows that whole story because, you know, we've told it before. So.
Yeah, of course not. There was something I forgot what I was going to say now.
I'm sorry.
She made that train leave the station. You know, I thought that train leaving the station only had to do with old folks. I see that's not true.
Yeah, not as young as I once was, and I'm not old yet. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
When do you get to your 50s?
Yes.
I got a couple years before that thing.
Well, I got a few years and then I can legally retire, so I'm looking forward to that.
Nice. But yeah, it's nice to be out. It's nice to be awake. It's nice to be able to tell my story. I wish I could be more specific, about who I am, where I am, all the other great stuff. I've had a number of people say that they thought they recognized me, say that my voice sounds familiar in all different areas, which makes me happy because I guess a couple things. One, I'm just an average blend into the background guy.
Yeah.
Two, my story is common enough that I'm not the only one sharing this type of story. And three, it's nice to be able to connect with people and help them to process these things.
Yeah.
So
Now the only problem is when we upload this on our channel, now your face is there.
I had my face up one other time too, so I don't really.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's
Yeah.
fine.
But
So I'm at the point where we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But we do know that we have sent, several people your way to talk to.
Yes.
And because you were the Kobe and elder, in your congregations, I know that it's helped people in trying to deal with judicial hearings and stuff like that. Mike and I just don't have that experience of how to direct them and give them, the choices of what they could possibly do, as far as fading or disassociating themselves or their judicial hearings and everything. So we appreciate all the help that you've been able to give ones in that area.
I'm always willing to help anybody that needs it. So anytime that my experience can benefit someone, I'm certainly happy to help.
Yeah.
So.
And I do know that when we first started Skyping and got to be friends, one of the first questions I asked you is, this Elder's Manual I have a copy of is the same one that you had.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, you read that, it's like, oh my God, like what a bunch of.
Yeah.
Oh well. This is the most powerful. The funny thing is, the biggest publisher of apostate material is the Watchtower Society. If you look at their old literature, it all becomes apostate after a certain period of time. None of us will ever have the ability to publish as much apostate material as the Watchtower has already produced.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's funny, just as you're saying that, I have a Watchtower sitting right here on top of my desk that I was reading, for our next video from the November 1st, 1931 Watchtower, page 327. There is no change or difference in any of the fundamental truths, but the difference relates to a clearer vision God has given his people.
If you stop and think about that, obviously, if you look back at stuff, it's been wrong. It hasn't just been like, oh, we understand this better now.
Yeah.
How can you possibly argue that an overlapping generation is a better understanding of everything?
Well, how can you possibly understand any better when all of the archaeologists in the world saying Jerusalem was destroyed in 587, 586? How does that light get brighter? It just doesn't.
Yeah, no kidding. So that's the thing, though, is that the people that are trapped they're trained not to think, and it's getting worse. Like, oh, if you hear something negative, shut your mind off. Push the thought out of your head. So I've heard this saying before that like radical organizations have to become more radical.
Yeah.
And they've always been pretty radical as far as like don't think for yourself, blah blah blah. But you're hearing it more often now. It's expressed roughly the same way, maybe in more graphic terms, but they're going to have to increase that, especially as we go about putting information out about who they really are.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated your videos you did on the generations. Some of those I actually watched like twice. And that was so good, to bring out, what a generation was.
Yeah, it was about 40 years.
But I have to tell you, Spike, we've got a couple of people that have told us that we are all misunderstanding it. You go by Methuselah's lifespan and for a generation.
In that case, we've got another 1,000 years, and if it's overlapping, that's 2,000 years.
That's 2,000 years, exactly.
Christ, to stop taking a coffee break and get moving.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's really interesting to watch how we perceived ourselves as having to reacted if somebody came up to us at a literature stand, and to hear this JW say, well, I would rather be wrong and with the congregation rather, than to be right in a way. Could you actually picture yourself saying something like that as a fully indoctrinated JW? Because I can't picture myself saying that, because I would immediately be able to think, wait a minute, why would I jump off a bridge when everyone else is jumping up? That's clearly wrong. I mean, I could never see myself saying something like that, not knowing that I'm being secretly recorded.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would have ever said something like that. I have heard other people say it.
Yeah, I have too.
I've never told that line. But part of my whole approach, another thing I started doing just for the fun of it, is like messing with people who are like apologists on other people's videos.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of entertainment, isn't it?
The way I approach it too is like I never go at it from doctrine. I always go from logical fallacies. Because anybody who's an apologist, the only thing they have to support their opinions is logical fallacies. So I just continually point that out. I'm like, well, this is a logical fallacy for this reason. This is a logical fallacy for that reason. So can you support this point without using a logical fallacy? And then, they always try to say, oh, well, you're a bad person, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, you don't know me. I'm like, you have no reason. I'm like, that's called an ad hominem attack, which is also a logical fallacy, which also means that you know that I'm right. So thank you for your attack.
Yeah.
I try to make them look, you guys don't know how to reason at all.
Yeah.
Your thinking ability is non-existent. Your beliefs cannot withstand rational scrutiny in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
So I try to, sometimes, they end up shutting up because whatever.
Well, yeah, that's what usually ends up happening, is they end up going away.
Yeah.
Or going to someone else's YouTube channel and starting all over again.
Yep.
And it makes you wonder whether they do this because they're counting time.
I believe they are.
That's what I think so too, yeah. Yeah. Even though Watchtower says you can't count time doing this, conversing with apostates, darn well that there's a bunch of them doing it.
Even that right there, what's your scriptural basis for counting time? Galatians says not to be the master over others' faith.
Yeah.
If you have to report your activity to someone, how are they not the master of your faith?
Exactly.
Anyway.
Good point.
Exactly.
Good point.
Yeah.
So, Spike, we want to thank you so much for spending your Sunday morning with us and sharing your story. And, if there's anything else you want to add before we say goodbye.
I want to thank you guys for having me. I appreciate the work that you've done. You guys, you've helped a lot of people. I respect that, and I thank you for your work. I also want those who are going through the process of waking up to know that there is a community of people out here that does love you, that does care for you, and that desires to help you. If I can be of any service to anybody in any way to help them through those things, please let me know. But thanks to Mike and Kim for all the work that you've done, and thank you for having me on your channel.
Oh, it's all our pleasure. It's, I've said this before publicly. Our YouTube channel is not about Mike and Kim. It's about the community. Like when the Vast Apostate Hour, when that whole idea started coming first, we were asked if we wanted to be on there, and I said, no, just let others be on there. Everybody sees enough of Mike and Kim on our YouTube video every week, and on a YouTube channel. So let everyone else have a go at it first. Let the community get to see some of the other people that are out here, and get and form a bond with people such as yourself and some of the other ones that Joel has had on that program. So it's I think the more that we can help ourselves, because really the world has a hard time identifying with us. We can identify with ourselves. So even doing something like this and sharing the experiences, as far as I'm concerned, is very encouraging, because you realize that you're not going through this alone. We all have a commonality, and that's the control of Watchtower.
Yep.
And
definitely.
we really appreciate all the hard work you have done, because your videos, they are just awesome. And that Spike teddy bear, he is just so cute, How could those trolls and apologists be angry with him?
There he is.
England. Play with the way you sits though, but other than that.
Yeah. But, I know you do a lot behind the scenes too.
Which I think we all do.
and we appreciate everything that you do, and you're a great addition to the community, and a soldier in the vast apostate army.
That's right,
so.
the vast apostate army.
It's the first time in our life we really are fighting for the truth. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's just
Exactly.
like in the video we did, I think yesterday or the day before. We're declaring war on Watchtower. This isn't a game.
No, this ain't a game.
They're hurting people. They're abusive, and they're hurting.
To be honest, they declared war on us. We're just responding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. A good point. So we're going to say goodbye right now.
It's been a pleasure. Love you, Spiker. I almost said your real name, but no, but there is, and just
wishes.
yeah. So anyhow, you enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.
And we love you.
Bye.
Bye.